today's session, we're going to learn how the reproduction process occurs. Now, this is Biology, Chapter 34, Section 2. Now, the human reproductive process depends mainly on cycles and hormones. How this happens? Now, we have two preparational modes before the actual fertilization. We have the egg formation and release, and we have the sperm formation. Now, let's start by the egg formation. Let me change to the book 1 minute. Okay, so how the production of eggs happen inside the female's bodies. Now, we already established that females before puberty, or when they born with about 2 million eggs. Almost more than 3/4 of these 2 million eggs will be break down until only 400,000 cells are left. Now, at puberty, a monthly hormonal cycle begins in females. Normally, it's every 28 days, but it differs. We will explain this later. Now, basically, the FS hormone stimulates the egg to complete meiosis 1. Of course, if you remember, sex cells, they undergo meiosis. They do not undergo mitosis. Mitosis for somatic cells, but meiosis for sex cells. Now, meiosis 1 will prepare the potential egg will divide it into 2 cells, a larger cell and a smaller cell. The larger cell will receive most of the nutrients, the organelles, and most probably likely this cell will be fertilized. The second cell is, we call it polar body, the smaller cell. The polar body will be later reabsorbed, breaking down and reabsorbed. Now, then meiosis 2 will occur, but we complete it only after the sperm enters the ovum or the egg. So this is the production of egg, basically. Now, the production of egg, then the release of egg, then the transport of egg, the travel of egg to the uterus. So these all are part of process and cycle. So at the beginning, inside the ovary, the egg will be enveloped by a group of cells, we call it follicle. This follicle
a small narrow cavity or sac in an organ or tissue, such as the ones on the skin that contain hair roots or the ones in the ovaries that contain the developing eggs.
Good. So the follicle will envelop the egg at the start. And the ovulation process, it's basically the release of the egg from the follicle. So the ovulation,
the release of an ovum from a follicle of the ovary.
Good. So the ovulation process is basically the release of the egg from the follicle. Now, then the egg will move through the fallopian tube to the uterus. The movement of the egg through the fallopian tube will take 5 to 7 days. it differs between females. So for some females will this egg will travel in 5 days, some 6, some 7. Now, during the travel of fallopian tube is the best time to get pregnant. Now, we will explain that, elaborate in that later on. Now, most cases, one egg is released during the ovulation, and about 400 to 500 eggs are released over female's reproductive life until the female hit the menopause. Also, I will elaborate on menopause later on. Now, what is the menstrual cycle? Menstrual cycle, let's hear the definition together before I can continue
Menstrual
explaining.
cycle. The female reproductive cycle, characterized by a monthly change of the lining of the uterus and the discharge of blood.
Good. So, the menstrual cycle is the process, basically, is the process of preparing the egg, excuse me, and releasing the egg, and preparing the egg for fertilization. Now, if fertilization does not occur, then the cycle will restart. This is what happened to the females during every month during the few delightful days they have. Now, the menstrual cycle divided into 3 main phases. We have the flow phase, the follicular phase, and the luteal phase. Now, the flow phase, from day 1, you will notice that flow begin. The flow is basically the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, or what we call the endometrium, detaches from the uterine wall and passes through the vagina to outside the cell. Now, this discharge usually contains blood, tissue fluid, some mucus. Now, the muscles helps in discharging these materials outside the body through series of contractions. We call it cramps. And these cramps can be painful for some women. That's why if you notice, some females will suffer from like discomfort and some painful few days they will have, and they compelled to take some sedatives and etc. It's because the cramps and these contractions, these muscle contractions are painful for some, of course. Now, during the flow phase, the level of FSH start to rise. Now, another follicle in the ovaries begin to mature during the flow phase. So, during the flow phase, I want to show you the figure. So, during the flow phase, the uterus lining and some blood flow out of the body. Good. Now, the follicular phase, after the FSH hormone starts to rise, what will happen in the follicular phase lasts about 6 to 14 days, to almost half a month. In this phase, the level of estrogen in the blood will relatively be low. Hormones from hypothalamus will stimulate the pituitary glands to release more FSH and LH. Now, FSH and LH will cause the egg and follicle to mature. Now, the ovulation occurs about day 14. As the egg develops, the follicle release estrogens, which steadily increase over the next few days. Then the hormone causes the endometrium to rethicken. If you remember, during the flow phase, the endometrium detaches and the wall is not thick anymore, the uterine wall. Now, the endometrium will be thickened. Now, estrogen now will stimulate increase in LH, which causes the follicle to rupture. Now, here we can notice. Now, in the flow phase, normal level of all hormones. In the follicular phase, we will notice the estrogen all-time high is rising and the LH is rising. And we have a little FSH levels also. Now, all of these hormones are rising for what? Increase in FSH and LH to cause ovulation, and the increase of estrogen cause the lining of uterus to thicken. So the estrogen make the lining thicken. This is the lining after it expelled. Now the lining is thickened because of estrogen levels, and the LH, FSH will follicle maturation. Okay? Now, the third phase is the luteal phase. Now, sorry, luteal phase. So the luteal phase, in this phase, what will happen is release of hormones. These hormones, the LH and the FSH and the estrogen, will drop. LH and FSH will drop up almost completely. We have a raise in progesterone, estrogen, normal, almost normal ranges, will cause the follicle to rupture. And the blood vessel here will increase, the lining will be thick, very thick, and the egg released from the follicle. Now, and the follicle will compose something called corpus luteum. The corpus luteum, we'll talk about that later. So the release of progesterone and estrogen stops production of FSH and LH, increase blood vessels in the lining of the uterus. And this is why the blood discharge with other materials during the period, the menstrual cycle, because we have increase in blood vessels in the lining, the endometrium. Okay. Now, the corpus luteum, or yellow body, release estrogen and another hormone, which is progesterone, as I mentioned, limits the production of LH and FSH. Okay. And the corpus luteum now breaks down and stop secreting estrogen and progesterone. As a result, the uterus lining begins to shed if the egg is not fertilized. Okay? Now, so we have three phases of the menstrual cycle: the flow phase, the follicular phase, the luteal phase. Now, I forgot to mention something. Now, if the fertilization does not occur, so the FSH and LH, the corpus luteum breaks down and stops secreting estrogen and progesterone. then the uterus lining begins to shed and the next flow starts. So let's see it together here. So we have the flow phase, follicular phase, luteal phase, flow phase. Now in the flow phase, as we explained, the uterus lining and some blood flow. It's basically the endometrium shedding, and we have discharge of blood, mucus, and some tissue. Now, after this, the walls will start to re-thicken the endometrium because of triggers from FSH and LH and estrogen. So estrogen will stimulate the wall thickening. FSH and LH will help in follicle maturation. Okay? Then the ovulation will start, the egg will be released between the phases. In the luteal phase, the LH and FSH will drop, and the progesterone and estrogen, progesterone and estrogen now will increase the blood vessels and thicken the lining of the uterus. The egg will be released from the follicle. The rest of the follicle now will be called corpus luteum. Now, corpus luteum will help in producing progesterone, and the egg will travel through the fallopian tube during these 6 or 7 days. If the egg is not fertilized, then the next flow phase will start. The lining will be shed and the blood, mucus, tissue will discharge out of the body, and the whole process will start over. Okay? Now, the menopause is basically the cycle. This cycle will gradually become more and more irregular in females and finally stops altogether. Menopause can occur mid-30s. It can start as early as mid-30s. And some women, they keep regular menstrual cycle until their late 50s. But it's like very few, almost impossible. Now, this is the egg production. Now, for sperm production, basically, it's very simple process. The egg will undergo meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. But not like the egg production will not produce one huge egg and polar body. No, they will produce 4 perfectly healthy, active sperm cells. Okay? Now, the production also is triggered by hormones like FSH and LH. Okay? Now, the sperm cell composed of the head, the head part here, acrosome, and the midpiece, which contain mitochondria, and the tail. Now, each part has a specific function. For the head and acrosome, the head is nucleus here with 23 chromosomes. The acrosome, I will explain this in the next page, and the mitochondria in the midpiece to generate ATP that the sperm needs. The tail or flagellum basically helps in movement. So, the major thing we need to know here, after the sperm released, the testosterone levels decline, because when testosterone levels increases, so that triggers the production of sperms. But when the sperms are released, the testosterone level decline. So the low levels stimulate the hypothalamus and sperm production increases again. So basically what happened is, in order for the production of sperms to be triggered, the hypothalamus will release hormones. Okay, these hormones will start trigger the production of sperms. Will this happen? When this process is happening, the testosterone levels will be all-time high. After that, the sperms are produced, and after production left the body through the penis. Now, the second the sperms leaves the body, the testosterone level declines and the hypothalamus re-triggered by FSH and LH to start producing sperms again. And males will produce sperms during their lifetime. They will never stop until there is some syndrome or disease. Now, the fertilization process is basically the joining of one egg or ovum and one sperm. Now, fun fact, each ejaculation from the males contains about 50 million to 500 million sperm cells. And the fun fact is only one sperm will fertilize the egg. And the rest of millions of sperms will be digested and will break down, will disappear eventually. So the process of fertilization, why only one sperm? Let's explain this first. Now, because the egg membrane the egg has a protective layer. This protective layer, when the sperms attach to it, only one sperm will discover a certain binding site. This binding site will allow only one sperm. So when the sperm find this binding site, the acrosome, do you remember the acrosome? Will release a specific enzyme that digests the membrane at that specific spot. So the egg membrane has one binding site and millions of sperms are on the membrane. Now, a lucky sperm found this binding site. The acrosome will release enzymes, digest this spot, and allowing only one sperm to enter. Now, when the penetration happens, the surface will change. This is an actual photo. This is an actual photo, by the way. So, the surface of the egg will change, and they will form a barrier to stop other sperms from trying to enter. Now, the egg and sperms are together, and the meiosis II can be completed. It's the unification of 23 chromosomes from the mother with 23 chromosomes from the father, sperms and eggs, and they form fertilized egg, the zygote.
Zygote, the cell that results from the fusion of gametes, a fertilized egg.
Good. So this combination of chromosomes help preserve genetic diversity, as we explained per genetics last year. So now we have cases, like rare cases, something called identical twins and fraternal twins. Fraternal twins Basically, when more than one egg released into fallopian tube, that means we have not only one fertilized egg, actually two fertilized eggs with different sperms. Moving through the fallopian tubes, we have fraternal twins. They are twins in age, but basically they're not genetically the same. But the genetically identical twins is when the same fertilized egg, the single fertilized egg, splits into two zygotes. This is a genetically identical twin. Okay? And sometimes, rare occasions, the egg can be split into three or four zygotes. And this is when we have three identical twins. And this is how the fertilization happens. Now, problems in fertilization. We have major problem of infertility.
Infertility. Persistent condition in which offspring cannot be produced.
Now, and this is due to many reasons. For example, in male, maybe the vas deferens too narrow, or and if this is the case, the sperms will not leave the body. Maybe the sperm count is very low. The fertilization, maybe certain illness like mumps can destroy the testis ability to produce sperms. In female, for example, a condition or damage in ovaries or fallopian tubes can prevent the eggs from being produced or reaching the uterus. So many reasons and syndromes can cause infertility, okay? And some many infertility actually problems can be corrected through treatment such as medication or surgery. Now, another cause of infertility, or another causes that affect fertility, is STDs, or sexual transmitted diseases.
Sexually transmitted disease. Disease that is passed from one person to another during sexual contact.
And only sexual contact. So, some sexually transmitted diseases, not some, all of sexually transmitted disease will definitely affect the fertility of males and females, and only happen after sexual intercourse. Now, we have many types of sexual of STDs. We have bacterial STDs, we have viral STDs. Okay, let me change to here 1 minute. So, we have bacterial like gonorrhea, like syphilis, and we have viral like HIV. So, during sexual contact, we already explained that. Bacterial STD, including chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea. Viral STDs include hepatitis B, genital herpes, human papilloma virus, and HIV. Now, bacterial STDs can be treated. Basically, it's treatable. In many cases, cured with antibiotics. Viral STDs also can be treated, but there is no cure for certain diseases. Okay? So, for example, HIV cannot be treated. By the way, herpes, when you get herpes, in many cases, even if your body treated the condition, the immediate condition, you still have herpes. And every like I don't know the exact time, but every certain period of time will reappear. So it's very dangerous situation, and acute cases of herpes can cause death. STDs, sexual transmitted disease, attack reproductive organs, can cause infertility. Untreated, some can be fatal. Avoided by abstinence or by using a condom. So basically, when do STDs occur? It's the irregular sexual function, irregular sexual intercourse, the unclean or unsanitized sexual intercourse. It means you need to be clean, you need to maintain your personal hygiene, as well as others, like the male and the female. They have to maintain their personal hygiene. The sexual intercourse must be like regular and organized, not chaotic. Many restrictions, not restrictions. Oh, no, I don't want to say restrictions, but if it's organized in the right way, then you minimize the STDs to all-time low level. Now, let's wrap things up or recap. So, the reproductive process starts with egg production and sperm production. The egg production, follicle stimulating hormone, the FSH, and luteinizing hormone, the LH, regulates egg production. Now, meiosis produces eggs and polar bodies. Each egg has 23 chromosomes. Meiosis completed at fertilization. Now, FSH, LH, and estrogen stimulate the three stages of the release of eggs. Follicle ruptures at ovulation. So ovulation, basically, it's the release of egg from follicle. Egg travel into fallopian tube. Ruptured follicle becomes corpus luteum. And this is the follicle, the rupture egg release after the follicle ruptures and become corpus luteum. Now, the eggs mature and are released according to hormonal cycles. The menstrual cycle has 3 phases. The flow phase, endometrium sheds. Follicular phase, ovulation occurs. Luteal phase, corpus luteum forms. And this is basically how the FSH, the hormone levels, how it changes through each phase. And basically the lining sheds, and if the fertilization does not occur here, the lining will shed again. And this is the menstrual cycle. Now, the menstrual cycle stops at menopause. Cycle continues until a woman's mid-40s or 50s. Decline in hormonal levels make the cycle irregular. Eventually, the cycle will stop altogether. Now, the sperm production. Testosterone, FSH, and LH stimulate sperm production. One sex cell divides into 4 sperms. Each sperm has 23 chromosomes. Meiosis 1, meiosis 2, 23, 23, 23, 23. Now, sperm cells fully mature in epididymis. Head contains acrosome. Midpiece contains ATP. Tail allows mobility. Acrosome, head nucleus, midpiece mitochondria, flagellum. Now, in fertilization, sperm penetrates an egg. Membrane keeps out other sperm. Nucleus of sperm join with egg. Zygote form. Now, multiple zygotes can result from fertilization. Identical twins from the same egg. Fraternal twins from two separate eggs. Infertility makes reproduction difficult or impossible. We discussed the cases of infertility. Sexually transmitted diseases are passed from one person to another during sexual contact. Bacterial STDs include chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea. Viral STDs include hepatitis B, genital herpes, human papilloma virus, HIV. This is the shape of HIV. Bacterial STDs can be treated and in many cases cured with antibiotics. Viral STDs can be treated, but there is no cure for these diseases. STDs attack reproductive organs, can cause infertility, untreated can be fatal. Avoided by abstinence or by using a condom. This is a parasite cause trichomoniasis, which can affect fertility. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this class as I did. Thank you very much. See you next video.